Scrapwood challenge, Scrapwood challenge. It's scrap, it's firewood, but some of the wood is good.
In this video, I'm going to make a cantilever box. It's based on a vintage sewing box, but the concept could also be used for a toolbox. It was my wife Kat's idea to make it. We're going to use it as a piece of furniture in our lounge to organise clutter like remotes or anything like that. I'll keep hold of these centerpieces because I'm sure they'll be handy for something in the future. That's all the stock prepared. Now onto the joinery, the fun part of the project. But before I start that, I'll take a moment to tell you about the sponsor of this video, which is Cove. I've been using the Cove Commuter now for a couple of weeks. It's a portable Bluetooth speaker. It's a great bit of kit and it's great to have around the workshop. It's very impressive, the sound from such a compact speaker, and it more than fills up the whole of the workshop. I'm using my phone and that was super easy to connect. On the speaker itself, it has easy controls. It has a couple of different modes for bass. The volume has a very cool dial and you can slide between tracks, which is very handy. The battery lasts for 8 hours on a single charge, which should get most people through the day. It's portable and you can take it just about anywhere. Check out the reviews as they speak for themselves. And the best bit is you can get it with 65% off by using my link in the description, which is coveaudio.com/PM65. And don't forget to use the code PM65 in the checkout. And thanks again to Cove for sponsoring the video. I'm laying out the parts of each box and then clearly labelling each side of all the joints so I don't get confused what goes where. For the joints, I'm going to make hand-cut dovetails. I mark all the boards first. I mark the tail boards all the way around and the pin boards just on the faces. I made my moccasin vise around 6 months ago. It hasn't been used on a project yet, so today gets its first proper test. I lay out the tails first using dividers, and I made this guide out of a piece of aluminium angle. I'm trying to cut to the lines, but it doesn't need to be perfect because we'll cut the pins to match on each joint. And now onto the pins. I'll lay the tails on top of the pin board. I offset it by a saw curve and mark the pins directly through the tails. The only difficult part of this is holding onto the tail board firmly, but when you've done it a few times, it's not too difficult. I then offset the board the other way and mark the other side of the pins. And then to cut the pins, it's easy enough to make a straight cut down to the baseline. With a coping saw, I remove most of the waste from the socket, going fairly close to the baseline. The closer I get, the less chisel work there is to do later. Then back to the tailboard and remove the waste from that. I'm removing a tiny nick so the saw can sit right up against the mark from the marking gauge. This is a very accurate way to make the cut. I'll go through and get every joint up to the same stage, and then I'll chisel them out. Even though the camphor laurel looks great, most of the scrap stock is sapwood and it isn't the easiest to work with. It tears very easy, but it is manageable and it does look very nice. Even though it worked, it was a little sloppy and not quite accurate enough. I wasn't happy with it, so I decided to plug all the holes in the boxes and the linkages with dowels and re-drill them all. When the glue dried on those plugs, I re-drilled the centre holes on the longer linkages and one hole on the shorter ones. I just made this guide from a piece of steel, and it should ensure that the holes are all drilled the correct distance apart. With the boxes in the correct position and clamped to the workbench, I can accurately mark out the centre holes. I'm drilling a pilot hole and going up in a couple of different sizes. I don't want the drill bit to wander off as it's going into the end grain of the dowels, and sometimes that has a tendency to do that. Using the steel guide and a bevel gauge, I can accurately drill the remaining holes. The holes in the boxes need to be 9mm to accommodate the nuts. Rather than jump straight in with a 9mm bit, I went up in 0.5mm increments again to avoid the drill bit wandering off. Now the boxes are done, I'll make a couple of lids. If this was going to be a toolbox, you could make something fairly simple, maybe with plywood, but this is going to be a piece of furniture, so I'm going to do something a bit nicer. For the centre of the lids, I'm using these Kumiko panels. I did make them off camera, but if you're interested in how to make them, I showed that in a past video and I'll link that above. Now I'm going to make a handle. It doesn't really need one, but the original vintage sewing boxes had them, and it does do one thing: it keeps the boxes in line when they close together. I need to glue a shim to the inside faces of the handle. This will give the boxes a little bit of clearance when they're closing. That really was a fair bit of sanding, and then I applied a coat of varnish, linseed oil and terps mixed in equal quantities, and then after that I finished it with a couple of coats of beeswax polish. Even though I made this for the lounge, my daughter Jess has got her eye on it and she's trying to claim it for herself. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one. And thanks again to Cove for sponsoring the video.